Hello and welcome to my channel. And this lecture will continue the talk about the skeletal muscles. So let's begin. There are different ways in naming a skeletal muscle according to the size or shape or location or even its action. In many ways, we have multiple examples. For example, by size, we have brevis means short, longus means long, longissimus means the longest, like the longissimus coli, for example. Magnus, large, major, larger. Maximus, the largest. Minor means smaller. Minimus means smallest, or latissimus means widest, like the latissimus dorsi, and vastus means huge, like the vasti, vastus, medius, and lateralis, and intermedius in the lower limb. By relative shape, we have deltoid, like the famous deltoid of the shoulder. Quadratus means having four sides, like the quadratus lumborum, for example. Rhomboidus means having rhomboid shape. Teres means cylindrical. Trapezius, having a trapezoid shape. Serratus means has a saw tooth at its shape. Orbicularis means circular. Pectinate means comb-like. Piriformis means pear-shaped. Platus, or like the platysma, means flat. And gracilis means slender, like the gracilis of the lower limb. Also, as an examples of the terms teres and quadratus, like the pronator teres and pronator quadratus, from your study of anatomy, you will understand the each muscle name and how it acquired its name. By action, there are abductors or adductors. Abductors means away from the midline, adductors moving towards the midline. Depressors and elevators, from their name, explains everything. Flexors decrease and moving that decreases an angle. Extensor, that increase the angle. Pronator, moving to face down. Supinator, moving to face upwards. Sphincter, decrease in size. Tensor gives tension in its action. Fixator muscles, that fix a joint during movements of other muscles, like, for example, the trapezius, that fixes the shoulder during the action of the muscles acting on the shoulder. Or by means of number of heads, like the biceps, that has 2 heads, and triceps 3 heads, and quadriceps, that has 4 heads. Or you can name the muscle by its location, such as the temporal muscle, because it's on the temple. Supra and infra muscles, like the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. Sub means under, means like the subscapularis, because it's under all the rest of the muscles. By fascicle orientation, relative to midline, rectus means parallel to midline. Transverse means perpendicular to midline, and oblique means diagonal to midline. Now for some microanatomy of the skeletal muscle. As mentioned before, it's striated muscle, means gives a striate pattern on microscopy, and this is due to the arrangement of the contractile proteins, which are myosin and actin. Myosin is the thick filaments, and the actin are the thin filaments, and you can see here the pattern. This is the area of thin filaments that extends into the area of thick filaments, and this area here is pure thick filaments. They call the disc that holds the thin filaments together the Z line, and the area of both actin and myosin is the is the A band, in the middle of which you will find the H zone, which has only thick filaments in it. The I band is the area where it has the Z line, or the disc that holds the actin fibers together in the middle. This is the I band. Because of this unique arrangement of thick and thin filaments, it gives the patterns of striations of the muscle, and the area between the two successive Z lines is called the sarcomere, which is the functional unit of the contraction of the muscle. Now, as mentioned before, the muscle has sarcoplasmic reticulum. The sarcoplasmic reticulum surrounds the myofibrils, or the actin and myosin, and the function of which is to reserve the calcium ions needed for contraction. And it ends on each side by structure that move from muscle fiber to cross the muscle fiber from one fiber to another. It's called the terminal cisterna, and between the two terminal cisterna of adjacent sarcomeres, there is an extension or tubular fold called the transverse tubule. The transverse tubules are pathways for action potentials that reach the muscle. These give the signal to the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release its calcium, essential for the contraction of the muscle, or interaction between actin and myosin. Now, the two terminal cisterna with the T-tubule in between, they are called the triad. If talking about fiber color, some fibers reflect different myoglobin content than the others, so they are classified into type 1 fibers and type 2 fibers. Type 1 fibers, they appear red because of the high level of myoglobin. They have more mitochondria and more capillary density. So because of this, they are more endurant muscles and slow to fatigue, because they use oxidative metabolism to generate ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. Type 2 muscles, on the other hand, are white because they have lower myoglobin content and reliance on the glycolytic enzymes. Now, according to twitch speed, fibers can also be classified on their twitch capabilities into fast twitch and slow twitch muscles. Fast twitch means faster contraction, but of shorter duration, in which the muscle myosin can split ATP very quickly, and they have higher capability of electrochemical transmission, of action potentials, and rapid level of calcium release. So this produces the fast twitch. They can handle calcium release and uptake very quickly by the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Now, these muscles are effective in generating short bursts of strength or speed and fatigue more quickly than the other type of muscles or the slow twitch fibers. The slow twitch fibers, they generate ATP by a long-term system of aerobic energy transfer. They tend to have a low activity level of ATPase, the one that breaks ATP to use for contraction, a slower speed of contraction with less well-developed glycolytic capacity. They develop greater number of mitochondria and capillaries, making them better for prolonged work than the fast twitch muscle. Function of the muscles. They have many functions, like of course the primary function is contraction to move the body, or in case of smooth muscles to operate the GIT, for example. And they have also endocrine functions because they secrete substances called myokines. And these myokines, one of the famous myokines is interleukin 6, is secreted into the bloodstream after muscle contraction. Also, due to the shivering action of muscles in cold weather, they generate body heat. Muscle contraction is responsible for producing 85% of the body's heat. But this heat is tend to be dissipated and wasted. Clinical significance of muscle means talking about some muscle diseases. In general, muscle diseases called myopathies and the nerve supplying them called neuropathies. The most common is neuromuscular disorders. There is also a group of muscle diseases characterized by mutations in the various proteins associated in the muscle, like Duchenne paralysis, for example. And also some inflammatory myopathies include polymyositis that affect the muscles. Neuromuscular disorders or neuromuscular disease can cause either spasticity or paralysis. Depends on the location and the nature of problem. For example, if the patient has an upper motor neuron lesion, the muscle will be spastic because of the loss of control of the lower motor neurons that supply the muscles. On the other hand, if there is an injury to the spinal cord and injury to the lower motor neuron, at the site of the injury there will be paralytic, flaccid paralysis. Means that the motor unit itself will be destroyed. Also, spasticity, not only in upper motor neuron lesion, but in general, there is nothing wrong with the motor neurons, like, for example, diseases of the basal ganglia, as we studied before, in Parkinson's and in Huntington's disease. These group of muscles, these group of diseases are characterized by rigidity of the muscles, especially that produces a shuffling gait in Parkinsonism, for example. Now, symptoms of muscle diseases vary between weakness and spasticity, or bursts of contractions called myoclonus, or pain in the muscle called myalgia. There are several ways to diagnose these disorders, like measuring the level of creatine kinase levels in blood produced by muscle, electromyography, for example, to assess the electrical activity in the muscles. Also, you can use muscle biopsy to directly see any changes in the muscle, or even by genetic profile to identify DNA abnormalities present or associated with myopathies. Hypertrophy of the muscle means increase in mass of the muscle, in size of the muscle. It's due to hormone signaling or development factors or strength training or diseases. It was popular belief that the increase in size due to increase in number of muscle fibers, and this is not the fact present. The increase in size is due to the adding of, due to cell growth and new protein filaments to the muscles that lead to adding of additional mass to the muscle. Biological factors responsible for hypertrophy of muscles, such as age, adolescence, for example, and hormone levels. During adolescence, hypertrophy occurs at an accelerated rate because of the level of growth stimulating hormones, and one of the famous growth stimulating hormones of muscle mass is testosterone. That's why it's easier for men to achieve muscle hypertrophy than women. Muscle atrophy, on the other hand, is decrease in the muscle mass, and the muscle gets smaller number and size of the muscle cells. This is called sarcopenia or muscle atrophy. Various diseases can cause sarcopenia, and also it's the landmark for cancerous disease or AIDS, for example, heart failure. In this condition, the muscle atrophy is called cachexia. It was found that in space flights where there is prolonged periods of immobilization and weightlessness also results in muscle weakening and atrophy. The astronaut can lose up to 30% of the mass in some muscles. That's why they advise the exercises on space stations, for instance. I hope you got the maximum benefit from this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.